Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Therapist Theater. My name is Josh Treese, and I'm coming to you from Music City, USA, with the podcast that takes a look at relationships and mental health through the lens of movies, TV, and pop culture. I have to say, I've been so happy with the response that the show has been getting. After each episode goes up, I've been getting messages from people saying how much they've enjoyed listening and how much the conversations we're having have helped them. And it absolutely thrills me to hear that this little show is doing some good. This week's episode is going to be something really special. My guest is my friend, Dr. Teri Murphy. I first met Teri when she was the TA in a class that I took in my grad program. She's a veteran of the United States Air Force, a former rocket scientist, a specialist in couples therapy, and just one of the coolest people to ever walk the earth. One of the things that Teri and I talk about on this episode is the Enneagram. If you're not sure what the Enneagram is, or maybe hold a passing understanding of it and its personality types, I'd like to recommend two resources. First, Teri's doing a series on her Instagram right now explaining it. So check out her Instagram at Dr. Teri Murphy, DrTerimurphy. Second, the book The Wisdom of the Enneagram by Don Richard Risso and Russ Hudson. I've been collecting your questions about relationships and mental health, and we're going to start answering them on the show really soon. Do you have a question you'd like to ask a therapist about a real-life relationship, or maybe even one in a movie that you'd love to hear from me and my guest about? Send it to the show. You can reach us at therapisttheater@gmail.com. We won't use names when answering questions, so feel free to ask what's really on your heart and mind. Okay, I don't want to hold this up for a second longer. Let's go ahead and dim the lights, raise the curtain, and start the previews. Welcome to the theater. We're recording now, so that's,
good.
That's on the That's on the tape.
I apologize in advance.
Or if it even, I don't know if you can say tape anymore, and I don't know if there's going to be people listening to this that'll know what tape is.
I have a teen client that I'm working with that I said, so what's the tape that plays in your mind? And she said, tape?
Yeah.
And I said, no. I said, MP3? She was like, not anymore. And I was like, what do you say? Like, what's a thing that's like a sound or a clip of a sound? She's like, you can say loop. And I was like, I can say loop. I can say loop. What's the loop? What's the loop that plays through?
I think the first like thing that I said that I realized I'm a very old person now was when I first moved to Tennessee and I was working at Starbucks and I made a Saved by the Bell joke.
Oh.
And the person looked at me like, what? And I said, oh, like Saved by the Bell.
And then you even mentioned the show and they...
Yeah, and then they said, I don't know what's Saved by the Bell. And I was like, Zach Morris? You don't... What?
AC Slater? Like, yeah. I'm so excited.
Yeah, they didn't know.
Oh.
They didn't know.
That's no good.
Yeah.
It's not a great feeling. It's not really an awesome feeling.
I have enough trouble self-identifying as a person in his late 30s. I know that I am outwardly, but inside, I'm still thinking like, oh my gosh, I'm 17. I've got to figure out, whatever it is. And so to hear that the most precious of shows is not still carried in the hearts of young people everywhere is tremendously disconcerting for me.
It is. When I teach sometimes, and I'll say, you know how it was when we were young, and then I look at these little fresh faces sometimes, and I'm like, oh, we were not.
You weren't born.
You weren't alive.
Yeah.
You don't know. So I was talking about after school specials. You remember these? Yeah. Like in the afternoon, it would be so intense, and it would be like, hey, do you want to get pregnant after school and like do crack, or whatever? And the more you know, like
which
that kind
I got to
of
tell
thing.
you, the time management that would be involved in that would be at a level that I'm not advanced.
I
even
couldn't
now.
do it.
I couldn't do it.
And they had no idea what I was talking about. Or even the more you know with like the star that goes across the sky. That was all such like.
What
if
would
you
it be
weren't,
now though? Because there's not
It'd have
even
to be
really special episodes of stuff
No.
anymore, is there? Would
Well,
it just be somebody made a YouTube?
someone made a
video
YouTube.
about?
Because is it even a PSA? I guess it's things now where there's like a campaign, maybe like a social
Yeah.
media campaign, like fighting hate or something would be like that went viral. Might be some sort of version of that. Feel like I sound old even saying that went viral. Possibly so. Could
well,
we just make this
go
go
with it.
viral?
We'll go with it, yeah.
We'll just do that.
So welcome to the show,
Thank you.
Dr. Teri Murphy.
Yes. Say it again. This feels really good.
Dr. Teri Murphy.
A long time in process because, see, I am almost 40. Yes. So 30s. I've just now gotten accustomed to being in my 30s, and I'm now about to
I know.
kick it right on
Which
the other side.
something that when I say struggled with, I'm being hyperbolic.
Right, right.
But like something that always kind of caught me was that you and Dr. Hopkins are both like a year and a half, 2 years older than me.
Yeah.
And I was sitting in your class.
Yes.
And I was like, how is it that they and I'm,
Mm-hmm.
what did I do
Mm-hmm.
or not do? Is probably more. That's probably more along the lines.
I really get that. That makes sense.
Dr. I even feel like saying it like that, it reminds me of The Fugitive. Dr. Richard Kimball.
Dr. Richard Kimball. That's a really good movie. I love that movie.
It is. He's got a good point.
Mm-hmm. Yes, great point. So intense.
Yeah. So we always spend time at the beginning of the show just helping people get familiar with the person that's on.
Okay.
So you're in therapy.
Yes.
You're even a couple layers, like you're in therapy education, I guess you could say.
Yes.
So tell me, why therapy? How did you get into it?
Yep. So I feel a little like the least likely person to become a therapist. And that sounds kind of weird considering how deep in that I am into things. But when I was little, we didn't do emotions in our home. So it's not like I came from this place where like I always knew I wanted to grow up and be a therapist or help people with their feelings or to work through problems or anything. That was so not the way it was when I was growing up. So I knew that I was loved. I knew that in like a cognitive sort of way, I was provided well for. We didn't have a bunch, but we had enough. Like I didn't worry about a lot of stuff. Typical sort of Southern family, really Southern Alabama. And nobody went to therapy. I didn't know anybody who even talked about mental illness or depression or anxiety. It wasn't in our canon, in our vocabulary.
Did you just have like maybe a concept from what you saw on TV or something?
Yeah.
Like,
right. And it was usually like the shrink or the psychiatrist. There was something terribly wrong or
Fraser Crane.
Or jokes. Yeah, exactly. So something funny, something silly, a trope, like, oh, maybe you should go see a doctor or they're going to take you off in a straitjacket. It was always these sort of jokes and didn't really take it seriously. My mom was a nurse for 30 years before she retired. So we took the medical sort of part of things very seriously. So that was the, what's the word that legitimate. That was legitimate care. If you were sick physically, that was okay. But we didn't talk about emotion. We didn't talk about mental stuff. And honestly, even if you were sick, it had to be blood or bone sticking out of your body before you were going to be taken care of. So you were pretty much on your own when it came to that sort of thing. So I found solace in books and in education and in knowing and being competent and fixing things and doing things on my own. I loved reading and finding new adventures and new worlds and using my imagination, but it was pretty solitary.
So you went deep into books. Enneagram-wise, though,
Yeah.
you're an 8.
3.
3, sorry.
Yep.
Which is the achiever?
Mm-hmm.
That kind of makes sense. And the reason
Yeah.
why I'm making a funny face when you're saying it is because, like, I'm a 6.
Yes.
Fear of the loss of safety and security. So for me, the books and the knowledge and the rules are what's going to keep me. So that's why I'm diving in, because to me, that feels like a life preserver.
Yeah.
Was it similar then
Yes.
for you? Or?
And in fact, I would say as a little girl, I resonate so strongly with type 6 of the loss of security, the loss of support. I craved more nurture. And the message that I got when I was little is it's not coming. It's not available, so count on yourself.
Yeah.
I stopped counting on the community. I stopped counting on my family to really do that for me. Now, I knew that I could go to them if I had questions, if it was logistics, if I was sick, if there were any of those sort of things. But
not comfort?
No comfort. Nope.
Huh.
Mm-mm. And in fact, it's still a struggle for me today. My husband and I talked about it. I was crying my eyes out right before this interview about how stressed I am, and I had no idea that I was that stressed. He knew.
Yeah.
He knew that I was that stressed. But for me, it's like I have to hit up against something fairly hard for it to register for me.
Thank God for attachment and attunement.
Thank God for attachment and attunement. So speaking of, how in the world did I become a trainer assistant and certified in emotionally focused therapy? So my entire therapy world, my career, what I believe in the core of my being is true about humans actually came to me through loss, not because of what I had. I know what it is to not have the thing that we needed and to not have any idea about how to get it. And so when I was little, the way I made sense of that was, okay, you're on your own. I was 5 the first time I had the thought, I just need to move out of here and get my own place. I need to grow up. I'm going to get a good job. I'm going to take care of myself. My therapist told me that's pretty young to have a thought like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think when I was 5, the closest I would have gotten was, what cartoon character do I want in my underoos? Like, I've got to get Transformers.
Mine were Wonder Woman. Yeah.
Because Scooby-Doo, I can't be taken seriously in Scooby-Doo.
Mm-hmm.
So I've got to step it up.
Yep. Yeah, so I did really well in school. I was athletic. I danced and did gymnastics and performed and that sort of thing all growing up. And what I found was, if I can't have straight on nurture, I can at least have admiration. I can at least perform.
There's the 3.
Yes,
Okay.
I can at least approximate as close as possible what that is. And I loved the way that felt. I loved being able to walk in a room and to sense, I could pick up on the feeling that was happening, but it never felt like it was penetrating my own heart, but I could give other people what they needed, what I felt like they wanted in that moment.
So did the achievements get you influence to where you could care for others?
Yes.
Huh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah.
In that sort of roundabout way.
While all the time kind of
really
thirsting
wanting
to
it
death on the,
for myself. So I was giving others what I actually really crave for myself.
That's kind of two.
It is. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've got my wings, but you can feel both. And in my later life, you'll feel this other sort of 4 part of me start to wake up. But very much in my early life, the 2 parts suited me, and I'm female. And so giving, sharing, serving are so socially acceptable that I was like, well, of course, that's going to be part of what we do. You're going to be kind, and you're going to be nice, and you're going to be easy to get along with. And yet inside there was this hunger and this feeling that something was missing. And so I thought maybe learning science, especially science, felt so good to me. Right, wrong, black, white, there's an answer. You can get to the answer. And it felt so much less confusing than my inner world, which didn't make any sense to me whatsoever. Nobody sat with me and said, those tears, babe, I'm wondering if maybe you're sad about that. And this is what we do with sadness. Do you want a hug? Do you want to talk about it? There wasn't any of that. And so it became a mystery and took a long time and felt painful. And so I just kind of disassociated from my heart. I kind of took a step back and thought, but I can do and I can think if I can't feel. I at least have my brain and I've got my body. So I'll go there where the success is able to be had. And so
there's an element of control.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And highly anxious as a kid. We've talked about it a little bit. I had OCD tendencies and I needed to do things just so. I mean, to the point of counting and needing things to be completely even and doing things in even numbers and always starting on the right or having to go back and do things again. I had rituals in a world that felt very out of control. Yeah. And reading was that way for me too. I felt like I could have enough knowledge to make sense of these things that didn't make sense. So fast forward then into college, I got my undergrad in chemistry. I wanted to get my doctorate in chemistry. I wanted to be a professor in the sciences and do research because it just made so much sense. But there was something in me that also was calling me in a really different direction, and I didn't know what it was. This sort of longing that I felt very far away from, but couldn't sort of shake what it was. It's almost like catching it out of the corner of my eye, tapping me on the shoulder. If I turned and faced it, it would be gone. But there was something there, and I don't really know why, but I listened to it, and I decided not to go to grad school in chemistry. And instead of going to the East Coast to South Carolina, to where I was accepted to do a program in organic chemistry, USC.
Oh, that's where I'm from, Columbia.
You're kidding me.
Yeah.
We put money down on an apartment. I accepted a teaching assistantship. I had a scholarship to get my PhD there.
Wait, so you and Chris were already married?
We were already married. Yep.
Yeah, Leanne. So Leanne got her undergrad from USC in social work. Yeah.
We loved it. Loved the university. There was this little apartment on Maple Street that that's where we were going to be. Huh. And about a month before I was supposed to start there, I felt deep down, I believe it was God saying, no, this isn't right. This isn't where you're supposed to be. And so we listened and we let them know we're not coming. My husband actually did that because I chickened out and was too ashamed, to be honest. If we're just going to be honest here, and I think that we should, and that's really what happened. He
this
let
is
them
a
know,
safe place.
This is a safe space. So we went to the other coast. I went into the Air Force. And
okay, so how did you there's a shift there.
Uh-huh.
I'm going to go study chemistry. I'm going to go to the Air Force.
Yep. So I used my chemistry degree. I became a propulsion analyst in the Air Force and went to the Space and Missile Systems Center in Los Angeles and went to the other end of the country.
You make that sound so easy. I went propulsion and
I know. Yeah.
I knew a guy. I made a call.
Yeah.
I
did. There was a part of me that always wanted to serve in the military. My dad did. My papa did, who I was super close with. And I had been going back and forth when I was in college. I almost did the ROTC route, but
I did ROTC.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really liked it. I liked the structure of it again. It made sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
It was predictable. There was some order. And what I honestly think in looking back, my husband is this secure base for me, super attached. And really a lot of my healing work began in our relationship, in the context of our relationship. Mm-hmm. And as I started to feel safer, I started to need a little bit less of the structure. I started sort of coming home to myself and then started thinking, what is this? Like, what are these things happening? Like, what is going on? This part of me was waking up and I didn't know what to do with it. And still, therapy wasn't really the thing that I was thinking of. And it wasn't until I served my 4 years, got out of the service, and was doing this contracting position on base. So all of the new lieutenants who came to LA would come through one of my classes. And we would acclimate them to the base and teach them about the work that they were going to be doing in this career field that is such a niche sort of thing that we would do. We would work with universities and contractors, these big companies, and have to do military duties. It was this acquisition sort of part of the work. And they would come and talk to me afterwards and say, I'm really depressed, but I'd lose my clearance if I go and see a therapist. Can I just talk with you about what's happening in my relationship? And they would have nowhere else to go. And I didn't really feel qualified to do that, but I saw them and I knew what that was like. So I would sit with them at lunch and sit with them after hours.
Do you think that was just maybe in your teaching or in your interaction with them, that they just felt a connection?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And even I have such a tough time imagining in a military setting.
Yeah.
Like, because that's such and I never been in the military.
Yeah.
Have relatives that are, but just picture it being, I'm going to use the word professional.
Yes.
Just because I would say that there would have to be like boundaries
very
because
clear
of
hierarchy.
job roles and things.
Yes.
So I would imagine that's a bigger risk in the military to go to someone who's above you and be vulnerable, reveal a weakness. Not a weakness. It's not a weakness, but it could be perceived as one.
Well, vulnerability is not a positive word in the military.
Yeah.
At least it certainly wasn't then. And even when I work with the military now too, and it's still something that has to be defined appropriately because of that exact sort of thing. And it's true. So when I was we were on a base that was all pretty much top secret SCI clearance. And so because of the nature of the work that we did, if you went to therapy, the chances that you would lose your clearance and lose your position were very high. So
regardless of confidentiality,
because there isn't any therapists, like there isn't, like you're unless you're seeing the chaplain, your records are public to the military. So have to be because of the nature of the work that we do. So there wasn't that. So if you talked about something with your superior, it goes in your record. So being a contractor and someone that wasn't in their chain of command gave them an opportunity, a safe space, maybe one of the only safe spaces to talk about real things. I'm pregnant and deployable. What do I do? You know, where can I go off base for a therapist so that nobody really knows what's going on, or I'm just having a hard time. How do you navigate this as a woman who's in the military? Or how do I do this? I'm a second lieutenant. My boss is upset with me all the time, or I don't really know what being in the military is supposed to, like, what does it even look like? Or where do we go? What do we do? And I started to think, man, I wish there was something I could do where this would be the work, the little moments in between the teaching, the moments where people were just sitting with me being themselves and I was being myself. And here's the thing that did it to me, gives me chills, makes me want to cry even saying this, is I had nothing to say. I had nothing to really offer that was fixing any problem, but something about me just being with them.
Well, that's not true, because you were being your real self.
That was it.
Showing up with their real self.
And they were getting better.
Yeah. Base level, it was just you were offering intimacy.
It was just intimacy.
Yeah.
And it wasn't because I knew how to do it right. And it was one of the first times in my life I wasn't performing a thing. It just was.
Oh, it just leaked out of you.
It did. And I was like, I want more. What is that? But I didn't know. I hadn't had any experience in psychology or therapy. The one psych class that I took in my undergrad, I got like a B- in. It was the worst grade I got in anything. I didn't understand it. I don't know what's going on. These people are all nuts. Get me out of here. I also got sick and had a lot of cough syrup in one class and hallucinated a little. So that might have had something to do with it.
I was going to say maybe you got the B- because you said people were nuts. Because
it could have been. You're not supposed to say that. Yeah. So anyway, when I came, we moved back here to Nashville, and we were in a Sunday school class, and one of our dear friends still to this day was talking about the work that he did the very first day of church, a month after we'd moved here, said, I got clients this week, a marriage and family therapist, and my ears kind of perked up, and then he talked about what he did, and I just knew, that's it. That's what I'm going to do. And I used my GI Bill from the military to go and get my master's in marriage and family therapy.
Nice.
Yeah. And then a class there, heard about attachment theory, and the same thing happened. It's like all these parts of me were clicking together, and then my own therapy work that I've done for years and years and years. And here I am.
Which I think the last part when you're saying you just heard attachment and it just kind of clicked.
Yeah.
I remember, even having you on the show, what were you in Dr. Harvey's class? Like a
TA, teaching assistant.
Yeah, so you were a TA in our marital therapy 1 and 2 class, but you had also come in and taught for Dr. Hopkins a couple of times too.
Yep.
So, professor role, as far as like I was sitting in the class, that's how I.
Yeah.
But I remember somewhere in there when we started talking about modalities, which this show is not for therapists.
Right.
It's for just folks.
People.
And so like a modality for a therapist is just a worldview. How do you think that people work, and how do you think that change works?
Yes.
And the reason why those are 2 important components in a modality is because you're going to sit with people and you're going to help them walk towards change. So naturally, those 2 things will be important.
Very helpful.
And so I remember much earlier than I thought was appropriate, you guys to start to talk about like, hey, you got to start thinking about what modality you want to practice. And I just remember thinking, oh, cool. So there'll be books and there'll be chapters, and I can make spreadsheets, and I can see which the pros and cons of each and which will offer.
I want to see those.
I never got around to making them. I was doing too much reading.
That's right.
But I it wasn't until I want to say marital therapy 1 and 2. So like when you came into the picture, we had to do role plays
Yes.
and film them. And I did one with 2 or 3 other classmates, and then you were giving me feedback on it. And at that point in time, gosh, I don't even know if I would have identified as wanting to use EFT.
Yeah.
I remember hearing other people talk about wanting to do attachment stuff.
Right.
And I remember thinking, cool, I still don't know. But then I turned in one role play, and then you came and sat down in front of the desk before class or something, and you were saying, and I think this came back in when we did the externship too, but you were saying like, hey, the stuff that you're doing, how do you know about that? We haven't gotten there yet. And I was like, I don't know. It just seemed like the right thing to say in the moment. And you were like, so that's a little bit ahead of where we're at in EFT. And for me, that was my first bit of, because it just felt right.
Yeah.
And so then to get a little farther in and go, okay, so here's the name of that technique. Here's the reason why that's important. Just kind of clicked. So for you, you came in contact with attachment and you were like, oh, that's how I think, and there's a name for it, and that makes sense.
So I was a systems engineer in the Air Force, and then for me, EFT is also a system. And so it's the same. This is just the system of how connection and bonding and the neuroscience of love works. And it's what I've searched for my whole life.
Yeah.
What is love?
Baby, don't hurt me.
Don't hurt me. Don't hurt me. No more. I've seen more today than ever. What are you doing to me? And I promise it's not the huge latte I had right ahead of time, right?
So you grew up this kid who didn't really engage with emotion and went into science and books and hard facts and things like that, and found comfort in there, but you felt like there was something more. You came in here, you found attachment, which EFT, emotionally focused therapy, for people that maybe don't know what that is, it's evidence backed, it's science backed. So if we could have found a better way to marry your two worlds, I don't know if that could have been possible.
It sounded so sexy to me. I don't even know what to say. Like, wait a minute. So the feelings that are inside that are mysterious, number one, can be figured out. Number two, are hardwired into all of us. You don't have to go and find it. It's not too late, ever. And number three, that you can become secure and connected and loving at any point in your life while also healing whatever was behind. Almost sounded too good for my ears to hear.
Oh, it sounds like magic.
It sounds like magic and alchemy. Like, whoa, we're going to turn this into that. And there was just so much hope in it. And then they said, and it's got 20 years of scientific evidence and outcome studies. So not just analysis, but outcome studies. 5 years later, 10 years later, these families and longitudinal stuff, these couples are still improving, not just retaining gains, but they're improving, which means actual healing, not Band-Aids, not only skills, even though there's that too. And that's what I want. So I didn't leave the pragmatic part of who I was earlier. There's still very much the scientist in me. I want to do what works for couples and what's manageable for me. I don't want to bring something in that isn't actually going to be healing. Like, I want people to feel good, but that's actually not my goal, which is a weird thing sometimes for therapists to say. Like, my goal isn't to make you happy. My goal is for you to heal, and joy will come. But joy and happiness are not always the same sort of thing.
Well, and I think it's more about, and this is something that I kind of say a little bit joking to every one of my clients, but there's such a deeper truth in it, is that the goal is to help the client become more of the client. So the goal is to help Josh become more Josh. The goal is to help Teri become more Teri.
Yeah.
Now, that means leaning into stuff that maybe we've leaned away from before.
Right. And probably for good reason.
Yeah.
And letting down those drawbridges and letting that part of you come out, a lot of times going to scare you yourself. And yet if we stay with it, it becomes manageable. Mr. Rogers said that. Feelings are mentionable and manageable. He was like a dad to me. The one place that I did learn about feelings and emotions properly.
Did you see his documentary?
I did, and
Oh,
I
yeah.
was really broken apart over
Oh,
it
yeah.
in the best way.
Oh, yeah. I was
In the
putting
best way.
143 on stuff
Oh,
forever
I
after that.
I love that. I've seen it. I see it in your stories, and it makes me happy every time. The one where you did the Christmas trees, and it was like all the twinkle lights and the little 143. I was like, yeah, that's right.
Oh, yeah.
I
And
could picture the trolley going.
Oh, yeah. It was just, ugh. And there's also people that I've talked to didn't know who Mr. Rogers was.
Yeah, that's just, I want to, okay, between me and you, and apparently all of the people who are listening, I want to throw those people out the window. And I also feel like that about clients sometimes. Like I made this post in this EFT group that we have where it's just clinicians talking about the work, person to the therapist stuff.
Oh, I got to get into that.
Oh, I'll invite you.
Yeah.
Where steps and stages, like really for me, it's always, I want to be, this is not going to surprise you now that we've talked about what we've talked about. I don't just want to do good work, ethical work, work that helps people. I want to always be the best that I can be at that. How can I improve it? How can I be even more surgically precise in my part so that I can just be present with them in their experience? I want to move my clunkiness out of the way as I'm learning and growing and being better and better. And there are still times where a client will come in and it's because I'm not tuned in. Like I'm out of tune, I'm out of sync, or I don't know their story well enough. I find that if I'm frustrated with a client, I just don't know them well enough because everybody makes sense in the context of their story. Everyone.
Yeah.
So if I want to throw your body out my window, it means I don't know you well enough, but I still have that instinct. Here's the
Yeah.
thing though, when you post this in a group of therapists, it goes over like a fart in church, right? Like no one's happy. It's very loud and very kind of clunky, but the thing that I would want to offer if there are therapists who are listening is that's okay. It's okay.
And I think to go with your metaphor, everybody else is farting in church.
Everyone
as well.
else is doing it too.
Yeah.
We I think sometimes, and this for me, I feel zealous about having feelings because I think I'm like, I just got them. I want to experience the full range of my humanity.
Yeah.
So I don't want to stuff down even the frustration because it's telling me something. If I don't listen to that frustration in session, I'm going to miss this person.
Yeah.
This is telling me I'm missing you. This is telling me I'm not tuned into you, that I need to actually maybe zoom out a little or go back and figure out where's the little boy inside this man I'm frustrated in. There's a very good reason for whatever's happening in them, and there's a very good reason for what's happening inside of me.
So I think my first reaction was when you said get a little more surgically precise in there was trying to take yourself more out of the room.
Yeah.
But what I'm actually hearing you say is just become more attuned to yourself.
Yeah.
To where you don't have to spend so much time, going through the mazes that are in your heart to try to track down what's happening, because you'll be able to just kind of say, oh, I felt some anxiety when he said this or when she said this.
Yep.
Oh, that made me feel fear.
Yep.
And then you can kind of learn to listen to your messages more to where, and that in the end, that does take you out of the way more.
That's right.
Because you don't have to spend time.
I don't have to undo
micro-processing in your head. Like, okay, what is it that
I can be more just open and present instead of jumping through my own hoops.
I think the fear was you're going to be less Teri, but you're saying, how do I get to be more?
How could I be more?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. I like that.
Mm-hmm.
So science, chemistry, Air Force, attachment, master's degree, EFT, and now you're teaching others
Yes.
the same. While at the same time, so right now you got the practice still. You're still seeing clients.
Yes.
On top of that, you're teaching at the university.
Yep.
So you are, and what I love so much about Trevecca, and was one of the biggest reasons why I went, was the people that taught us weren't teaching from things they knew from their practice 20 years ago.
It has to be current.
They're still in it.
Yep.
So
It's a requirement.
I'm not getting, Mark McGuire, who's 20 years removed from stepping up to home plate, teaching me how to bat.
That's right.
I'm getting, the current, I lost my sports metaphor. I don't know anybody now, but like I'm getting the current.
Terry Pendleton? We should just go all the way back.
I don't know. Yeah. But I'm getting somebody who's still at the top of their game.
Yes.
and isn't saying, well, back in my day,
Back
this
in my
technique
day,
worked.
yeah, we laid on couches.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're still helping clients while at the same time teaching people
Yeah.
how to help people. When that's how we met.
Yeah.
And so even though I know that I say this every episode, when it came time to picking out guests, you were at the top of the list because I just thought, you're just somebody who I like and somebody who I look up to so much, but who is also so much yourself. Like, I don't feel when I'm around you that I'm getting a version of you. I'm getting you playing a role. I'm just getting you. And I think one of the things that happened over time of me being in the program was when I came in, I had an idea of what a therapist was.
Yeah.
Now, I had been in therapy at that point for 2.5 years. Yes. My therapist, who, I just think the world of, just so happened to fit the stereotype that was in my head.
Yes.
Of a tweed jacket with
elbow patches?
Yes, leather elbow patches, who sat in a high-backed easy chair. And
I tried to convince our department that like doctors get white coats, we should get sweaters with elbow patches when we graduate as therapists. Yeah. No one was having it, but I thought it would be delightful.
You guys buy one sweater, you let us do a photo shoot where we get to put it on and sit in the chair.
Now that I might be able to.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll go to Goodwill and buy it myself and just bring it.
Absolutely. So my therapist fit that mold. Now he was still himself. He just had a jacket.
Yeah.
But then when I came into the program, I remember the very first time that I thought that might not be what I have to be was when we watched a video of Virginia Satir doing work.
Oh,
with a family that had 7 kids and one of them was smoking.
Yes.
And she was just in the middle.
Like that 80s family. Yeah.
Yeah. And she was wearing the Sunday school teacher dress where it was floral and it had a doily collar thing.
Yes.
And the sleeve thing was bunched.
The puffy things.
Yeah.
Yes.
And she would just walk in between these kids and grab them on the shoulders and pull them in and hug them and then say to another, no, not like that, like this. And she'd lift them up. And I remember having this light bulb go on when I said, oh my gosh, I might get a chance to be me and still do this. And it wasn't that I didn't like me. No. It was just I thought, when you think about a doctor,
right,
you have an idea of what comes up.
Yes.
And like I say most of the times in the show, it's because of what you've seen on TV.
It's true.
Or what you've seen in a movie or
maybe
what you've encountered in real life. Yeah. And so I just thought a therapist is X, Y, or Z.
Yeah.
And then I saw Virginia Satir and I thought, oh, cool.
Yeah.
And then I got to see Teri Murphy and I thought, oh, cool. And so this is the first episode where I brought a movie to the guest and I said, this is what I held this one and I wanted to see. I'm
smiling so big.
I wanted to see what you would have to say about it because Eternal Sunshine, I think what's your favorite movie is the toughest question in the world to answer.
Yeah.
And rather than him and haw and get the person to listen to my 10 favorite movies, I would always just say it's Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind.
Yeah.
Because it fit enough of the criteria to where I would be satisfied with that and they didn't have to listen to me talk for 20 minutes. But we were talking before we started recording and it was mainly, like I said, I saw the movie when it came out 15 years ago in 2004, which feels like an impossibility.
It does feel impossible.
But I saw it as a different Josh.
Yeah.
I saw it as someone who, kind of like you, didn't get any instruction on how to deal with my emotions growing up. I saw it as somebody who, even though I couldn't have told you, was lonely, was sad, was isolated. And when I walked out, I said, I loved that movie, 5 out of 5 stars. But I said, I loved it because of the visuals and the creativity. And I loved it because the ending was kind of sad and kind of vague. And I hadn't seen a lot of movies that were not tied up really neatly at the end.
I was about to say the same thing, that it left so much in the spaces between. That was kind of nice. It
and I think
didn't
you
do
could
the
interpret
predictable
it
thing
in a couple of different, based on kind of where you're sitting in your story.
Mine was pre wake up too. The first time I saw it,
and so I, knowing doing EFT myself, doing attachment myself,
Mm-hmm.
getting a lot of instruction in that from you in class and from an externship, like I just thought, holy cow, this movie shows it. I want the best person who I know to talk about it. And so here we are.
Here we are.
So
I feel really honored, honestly. I was thinking that when I was putting mascara on earlier.
same. Yeah.
Was just really, it means a lot. It means a ton, and I love this movie too. It's in my top 10 still,
Yeah.
15 years later.
Well, I was so scared about rewatching it after getting trained
Yes.
because I thought, is it going to be ruined for me? Like, am I going to watch it and then just be in a therapist space and start thinking,
like tearing it up somehow.
yeah.
Do you do that now? Like with movies, is it hard to take off the therapist hat sometimes?
Yes, but I'll tell you the thing that's really tough right now is, and I've never done this before, and my friend Micah, he used to do this with his wife, and I'd make fun of him, and now here I am married, is Leanne has me watching The Bachelor with her.
Yes.
And so
now that will get your...
that's the thing for me where, like, you know, like with some of my relatives, if there's a certain team, like a certain football team on, they will jump off the couch, they'll yell about something. So I'm doing that with The Bachelor, where like I'm watching the interactions between the guy and all of the girls, or even just the situation in and of itself. I'm like, I don't know how many girls there are.
Yeah.
20 or whatever. But every one of them is calling him their boyfriend and their relationship. And I'm like, he's not your boyfriend. He's making out with 10 other girls.
He is.
And how do you not just think, that's really unsanitary? I probably should.
Like you didn't even brush your teeth in between, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I'm jumping off the couch yelling that stuff. And every time he goes in for a kiss, Leanne is like, he always leads with his tongue as he goes in. Yeah. And so I'm like, yeah, but that's something right now where I'm having a tough time breaking out of the therapist.
Reality TV is harder for me than getting lost in cinema.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, those are real people. I am worried for y'all. Does your mom know where you are? Like, what is going on? Your friends let you go on this?
Yeah.
Like, you know they're going to provoke you on purpose to make the worst parts of you.
Well, and if it's not
come
so
out.
linear, they've got you for X amount of weeks.
It's an
They're just going to
intensive.
stitch it together.
Right.
Yeah.
And we all do different things. I think about this, like going to a conference or if you used to go to church camp or any of that kind of stuff. When you immerse and go into a space where you're isolated from any other thing, it is this whole other
Accelerates it.
culture. It does.
Yeah.
And it intensifies, it accelerates. It's why we do intensives for therapy sometimes, because you can do a different sort of thing there. And anyway, we could go all into the neurology.
And if
of
you
that,
think
but
about, you know, if you meet with a client 1 hour a week over the course of 2 months, you got
Right.
8 hours.
That's it.
If you spend an entire day with them, it's 8 hours, but it's all together, and you don't have to recap what you talked about last week.
You're saving at least 10 minutes out of each of those hours. You have a whole extra hour and a half, really, and they're already down in their experience, so they're not.
Yeah.
You're not having to emotionally scaffold people in and out either.
So with the movie,
Yes.
non-linear story. And since I hadn't seen it in so long, when we started watching the movie, Jim Carrey, who's Joel, is doing a little narration thing, and he's flipping through a sketchbook or a journal that he has, and he says, oh, there's a page ripped out. I don't remember doing that. And I gripped Leanne's leg, and I was like, oh my gosh, it's already happened.
It's already happened.
And
I
she was
know.
like, what? And I was like, yeah, it's already happened. And she goes, I thought you said you'd seen this. And I was like, I did. Wait, I did. But I forgot. And
Yes. I love movies that are out of order, like Memento and Time Traveler's Wife book, not movie. But I remember being in 6th grade, and we called it in media res, where you start in the middle and then you go back. And it does this thing where you're already invested because you already care about the character. And so when you go back, the stakes are so high, and you're like, I already know things. You're already rooting for things.
I said this last week on the show, and I got made fun of. I'm a big spoiler guy. I love spoilers.
Yes.
It's perfect. So when I'm reading a book, I read the first half of the book.
Yes.
I read the last chapter.
No, you don't.
I go back to the middle, and I finish the book.
As long as you don't tell me, we can sit together and read.
Now, I'll tell you, I got bit by something like that whenever Half-Blood Prince came out.
Oh no!
I went to go get my pre-ordered copy in Barnes and Noble.
Yes.
And standing in line to
Did you
pay
go at midnight?
for it. Maybe, yes, I think.
Yeah.
In San Diego.
We did it in California too.
Oh, nice. But I'm not. I just got it, so I'm not reading. I'm not reading ahead.
Right.
I'm flipping the pages.
No.
And it lands on the page.
No.
And I'm not going to say it on here, but just in case there's.
Was it the illustration?
No.
Okay.
Yeah. But it lands on the page, and you just kind of skim a page when you land on it. And I saw.
Was it a very intense scene that we were hoping?
Oh, it was the scene from that book.
Yeah.
And I remember.
Oh no! Were you livid?
Oh, in the store, I think I.
It was the day you got it.
I hadn't even paid for it yet.
No.
I think I slammed the book
wrong.
shut, and literally just went like, and looked around, just kind of frustrated.
My cheeks are hot.
Yeah.
Like, oh God.
And it's my fault. It's when you play with fire, you're gonna get burned.
You're gonna get burned. I said that to my husband today. We were joking. We were eating chimichangas, and I said, "Listen, this is what happens when you live on the edge.
Yeah.
This is what happens.
So,
you get burned."
Non-linear story.
Yes.
Before, or after we watched this movie last night, I showed Leanne a video on YouTube. I'll have to figure out a way to link to it in the description of this episode.
Oh, that's good.
But these people on their channel talked about the symbolism of Clementine's hair.
I paid so much attention to her hair this time. I'm curious what they said.
So they compared it to seasons.
Ooh, starting out blue.
And they said that her hair, because it's nonlinear, marks where they are in their story.
That's how I could tell.
So,
which I don't think I remembered the first time that I saw it. I wasn't paying clear attention to what colors.
I never picked up on it until I saw this video. Yeah. I mean, I knew that it was a marker, but I didn't think of symbolism.
Like how? I didn't think of the symbolism. Mine was much more literal.
Green's the springtime of their relationship. When they meet, her hair is green because it's a beginning and it's growing. Then it goes red for summer, and that is it's the fullness of their passion. They're the most in love.
Yeah.
They're the most
like the
in
intimacy.
tune.
Yes.
Yeah. Then it goes orange, which is like a fading red, and
like
it's fall, autumn. So in the video, they said this is where they can't stand each other.
Yeah.
They're just getting to where they don't like. And it showed this really quick flash of they're in a restaurant. They're eating and she's got these the pigtail bun things, and he goes to brush a little bit of hair.
Yeah.
And then she kind of goes to say something before she does. The camera cuts to him, and he says something like, he mouths it. It's repulsive.
It's repulsive.
And then she goes, it's repulsive.
Yes.
And it's, they've just gotten to that place where
it's the rut.
They can't stand each other. And then it's blue and it's winter and it's the death of their relationship, and she leaves and she chooses to erase him from her memory. Yeah. And then to circle back around at the very end, it's back to green, and she's got more roots showing. Yeah. And so they said it's her true self peeking through. And it's a little bit of a change because her hair was so, and she even announces it kind of at the beginning.
She does.
My hair is my personality.
This is it. This is how you know.
This is how you know. Mm-hmm. And then he, I think at the beginning, said something about he loved it. Mm-hmm. And then just at different points in it, especially after the company goes to pot and Kirsten Dunst sends out the tapes to everybody. Yeah. She walks in his apartment, the tape about her's playing, and he's talking about how much he hates her hair. Yeah. And then he's like, I love your hair. That's
so weird. Yeah.
But I think when they meet, Joel is, to say the least, withdrawn.
Oh. Yeah, there's withdrawn, and then you look way down the coast, and he's the little dot all the way at the end.
Yeah. Like
the back of his head leaving. He is the most avoidant, if we talk in attachment terms. Much more comfortable with a lot of distance. I mean, he's not very affective either. He doesn't emote a lot. Even the way he's talking, his mouth is very tight. You can't really read a lot of stuff. And it's very different by the end. But yeah, he starts off, it's very,
even in his,
very avoidant.
I think that at the very beginning, non-linear, so at the beginning of the movie, when they meet on a train, it seems like anytime he allows himself to speak to her, It's in very short bursts.
Yes.
And it almost seems like this is my programming for interacting with a new human.
Yeah.
It's like wave and say, hi, how are you?
Yes.
And then he kind of like his head's down and he's back
like
to.
a turtle. He kind of pulls back in
Yeah.
his shell really
Yeah.
quickly.
And then she is just.
She's all out.
And I remember watching that first scene as an introvert and just thinking, you are the most boundary crossing person.
Right.
She comes and is like, can I sit closer to you? And she like plops down and she's like.
It almost feels intrusive in some
He
ways.
says something about you seem nice and she kind of goes in on him.
Yeah. He says like, you do seem nice. That doesn't seem like something you would do. And she's like, how do you know what I would do? Like kind of right from the beginning, that heat comes out of her.
So it just seems like an opposites kind of. Okay, so here's relationship therapist.
Yes.
Right? Do you think opposites attract?
So it seems like it in so many ways. It really does. My thoughts around that are interesting, I guess, maybe. So the research says that that's not necessarily true. However, in my clinical practice, in my own life, in the people around me, there is this complementary sort of thing that tends to happen, that tends to pop up. So I don't know if it's statistically significant, but blah, 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 research, science. But in real life, what there seems to be, in my own opinion, is the way that we were raised, the way we were grow up, we kind of get shaped and molded by these certain things. And it's almost like we're looking outside of us for something to come and round those parts out. And in a lot of ways,
not complete,
but sort of come together with, that there's a fitting or some sort of synchrony that can happen sometimes, where there's a lot that does overlap and is similar, but there's that something that's very different, that when you come together, it feels like that interdependency that you really wanted and maybe didn't have. And it doesn't mean that there's something wrong, broken, missing. I don't mean that. It's really more just the way that we're shaped and the thing that we long for. There's like a familiarity even in the oppositeness. You know, it's almost like that thing that you didn't know that you needed that you do need. Like
I think there's a sweet spot.
Yes.
Like it can't be total opposites.
No, because then what are you connecting over?
Yeah.
But if you're too similar, that also doesn't seem like, where's the electric charge? Like, I think of it in terms of like physics or chemistry too. You need opposite sides of the magnet to really be pulled together, and there is that sort of magnetic attraction and energy. And even when it's non-sexual, I think that can happen, that there's this attraction, this pull. If it's intellectual, emotional, spiritual, there's this thing that is exciting and interesting when you find a thing in another person that is both similar but different. It's intriguing, it's curious, and I see that over and over and over again in my clients. And when they talk about the thing that drew them to each other in the beginning, a lot of times it's seeing that unique.
It's my favorite question.
Oh,
One of my favorite questions. Whether or not I've got an individual in front of me or a couple, tell me about, and I usually try to ask it as soon as I can, because I think it's such a big part of who they are. So when I'm trying to get to know them, tell me about how you met your partner, how you met your spouse.
Yeah.
You know, what was it about them? And then, of course, if they're in for some relationship issue, you know, why now? Why are you coming here now? And it usually leads back to that primary attachment relationship that's bringing them in.
Yeah, that's so good. You know, I had a couple yesterday that I was working with. We've been working together for about a year, EFT, and we're in this deeper work, this deeper stage of the work, where this formerly someone very much like Clementine, passionate, explosive, you know, protesting the distance in the relationship, is starting to, because their partner's engaged, is able to sort of let go of that protective strategy, because that's protective. There's a good reason for that protest, but really starting to drop into this tender, vulnerable sort of place. And their partner said to them, I want to be with you in that place. And as they did this enactment where they turned to each other and shared about their longing and the fear that came up with that, he said, this reminds me of two things. I'm like a timid child holding my heart out to you. And it reminds me of two moments in our life. The first time I ever told you I liked you and I didn't know what you would say back. And the day that I proposed to you. Feels just the same.
Ugh.
And I'm weeping with them. They're both weeping. It's this moment that was like a watershed for them. And it wasn't me. I didn't say, does this remind you of the first day you...
You didn't have to.
I didn't have to because
Yeah.
emotionally, I've got chills in my whole body. That was where they were, and they were together in it again. And it took them right back to that moment. And it happens sometimes in these moments. People talk about that. They talk about falling in love and what was it that drew them to each other. And it wasn't that it was too risky. You're not worth the risk. They took the risk before they knew. And we were back at that place again. You're worth the risk. You're worth the chance that I'll be rejected, because now we're not stuck in that rigid pattern where the only thing I see of you is you're despising me. I actually am all the way back to this place. And the movie made me think of that when I watched it after that session yesterday.
Oh,
right?
Oh my gosh.
They went all the way back to the beginning.
What a perfect time.
Yeah.
Yeah, so in maybe you could give, and I think I've held off on doing this too, but just a brief, if it's possible, description of what attachment theory is.
Yeah. I think I can do that. So Einstein used to say, if you can't explain it simply, you don't know it well enough, which is something I try to carry around with me as a teacher. It shouldn't take me a dissertation if I really know a thing. So we'll see. You let me know. You can like give me a wink or like a something like that. So the basic of attachment theory says that all human beings are hardwired for connection, that the neuroscience of our brain is responding. It's a call and response system from birth. And actually, there's science now that shows even prenatally that babies sync up with mother's heart rates and emotions and mental states, brain waves, those sort of things, and can recognize other people's voices outside the womb after they're born, respond to those things. So there's already a call and response. Attachment theory says that we need another nervous system to regulate us, that there is no such thing as total regulation on your own, that even self-regulation is about learning for parts of you to regulate other parts of you. And so we carry around with us safety and security or the lack of it. And so secure attachment is, the world is good. I am safe. People are trustworthy. If I have a need, I am worthy of having that need. I can ask for it to be met with a safe other, and it will be met.
Internal locus of control.
Internal locus of control. It's inside. This isn't codependency, which is I only can look to you, and I'm not even listening to what's inside of me. I have no responsibility for my own needs or emotions. That's not what this is.
I'm not okay unless you're okay.
Exactly. That's not what we're talking about. I'm okay and you're okay. Insecure attachment would be any lack of any of those things. And we think sometimes it only comes from trauma like neglect or someone was harmful, and that's not true. I grew up pretty avoidant because I felt like I was okay, that there wasn't anything wrong with me. I had everything physical. I knew my parents loved me. They just didn't have the capacity. They were doing the best they could. They just couldn't give me what I felt that I needed. And so I stopped asking. So I just counted on myself, but I had to shut down and compartmentalize my emotions. And so moving into secure attachment has been me re-engaging those parts of myself. But I thought it's not okay to have needs. And you wouldn't ask someone else to help you with them, even if you did know what they are. And I still struggle with that. Like for me, when a need comes up, it's scary to terrifying sometimes. And to turn to my husband, who's the most loving man and secure. He could be a bonehead, but like all human beings can be too. But to turn to him and ask him for that is risky. It feels like, remember Indiana Jones and The Last Crusade? That sort of under the lion's head when he had to step out over that canyon and it was clear and it was a leap of faith and he stepped out and he found solid ground under him, but he could have fallen into that ravine. It feels like that every time. So that's the sort of thing that insecure attachment feels like, is I actually don't know that if I called,
every
anyone
time's
would
a
come.
risk.
It's a risk every time until your neurology shifts into more secure attachment. So there's 3 different sort of types of insecure attachment. That's it. You're avoidant, like Joel, and me when I was little, I
Same.
turned to books instead of people. Right, you too. Knowledge, competency, task. We're probably good at our jobs. Like there are certain things you can count on us to show up on time. Like there are other things that we do really well and for good reason. But having to learn the emotional landscape. There's preoccupied, anxious, ambivalent, which is there was inconsistent caregiving. So sometimes your needs we've met, sometimes not. Sometimes your parents would be there for you, or coach or friend or lover, romantic partner, sometimes not. And so you have to stay on high alert all the time so you can catch them when they are available. But then even if they do show up for you, it's hard to really let it in. And then disorganized is more what we're talking about, that neglect, that trauma, where come here, but when you get here, I'm afraid you'll harm me. You'll use these things against me, be taken advantage of. I'm not okay, and you're not okay. Nothing's okay. And that one can also be shifted to secure. It just, any of those can move towards more secure attachment, which is the goal of emotionally focused therapy, is how do we help people move from insecure to secure attachment?
Yeah. And I remember, getting introduced to all that stuff in class and immediately kind of identifying, oh, I have an avoidant attachment style.
Yeah.
So my hand shot up.
Right.
And it was, hey, are you stuck with the same attachment style forever?
Such a good question.
Because even seeing that and just going, well, that's not how I want to interact with people that I care about.
Right.
And yes, attachment style can change.
Right.
To me, this is kind of how I think about it. So since you're the doctor, you correct me. But I always kind of think about it, you can learn a different attachment style, but you have a default mode.
Yep.
So when you are emotionally triggered, when you're not in your sober mind, when you're not being intentional, you tend to hit that default. And even now, there's still times with Leanne where had a bad day at work, or maybe even, she says something and it just hits the wrong nerve. And and she can spot it from across the room where I will go inside.
Yes.
I'll shrink into myself.
Yes. Where it feels safe.
Yeah, because it's that old tape message loop
Yes.
of it's safe inside.
Yes.
And, I think somewhere in school, we were learning about pursuers, withdrawers.
Yep.
The withdrawer says, this relationship is so precious to me that I'm going to hold it tightly. I'm going to take it to a safe place and wait and ride out the storm.
That's right.
When
and
it's
that'll be
safe,
the
I'll
best
bring it
hope for
back
the
out.
relationship.
Yes.
Yeah.
Whereas the pursuer, so we're talking Joel and Clementine. Joel's the withdrawer, Clementine's the pursuer. They see that disconnect happening, and then their best strategy is, I'm going to kick and scream and get as loud and big as I can to say, this is terrible. I need you. Come
That's
back.
Right. It's an alarm system that goes off, and
it's a safe, like a combination safe, and it's an alarm.
That's exactly. Oh my gosh. I've not ever heard anybody describe it that way. The alarm system, yes, but not the safe. And I love that. That is such a beautiful, I feel that in my gut. I'm 100% going to talk about it that way in class when I teach it next. Thank you for that
Just give me some
metaphor.
parenthetical notation there.
I sure will. Trees, 2019. That's beautiful because it's true. And then the more that you withdraw, well, you know what? I guess I need to make that alarm go off bigger. You must just not have seen it. So maybe I'll say it louder, or maybe this time I'll say it in a stronger way, or this time I'll try to hurt you so you know how much I'm hurting.
Or I've had a couple that was a client where the wife then began following the husband room to room. She wouldn't let him withdraw physically away.
Here I come.
I will follow you because this is so, and this was something she wasn't saying. This is so important to me.
Right.
This is a life or death matter.
Yep.
Because this is my primary love relationship, and there's nothing that matters more. And so
can't lose you.
I can't lose you. I can't let it go.
And any answer, even a bad one, is better than no answer at all when you're a pursuer.
A withdrawer, they are,
you're darned if you do, darned if you don't.
This is what you said earlier. Everybody makes sense in the context of their story. So if they are a true withdrawer, what they're thinking is, I'm just trying to keep this because they think about it the same way. It's so precious.
Yes.
It's so important to me. I'm just trying to keep it safe.
Yep.
If I say anything right now and it sets off an explosion, it's not safe.
That's right.
And so but in a primary attachment relationship, it's the only one in the entire world where any answer is better than no answer.
Right.
So
that's a big ask for our withdrawers, though. It's such a scary thing, and it's a big ask to tell a pursuer, if you put your bat down, what if he comes to you? Or what if she comes to you? Because what they learned when they were little, chances are they learned, but sometimes they don't come. If I don't follow, if I don't chase, if I don't cry, if I don't make it bigger than even I feel, if I don't amplify this up, no one will come. And of course, it was jars tucking it away, because if they did say something, they got bashed. That little precious relationship could be smashed. And so the best option is to do that. When you start to think of people in those terms, there's compassion for everyone. They do make sense.
Yeah.
And here's the thing that was new information for me. Two things. Number one, when you move into security in your attachment relationship, you're still going to pursue and withdraw, just like you said. It doesn't ever go away. That's not a sign of a healthy relationship. Conflict isn't the problem. The lack of repair is. And we kind of talked about that a little bit earlier.
The hurt's going to happen.
The hurt is going to happen.
So the hurt doesn't matter as much as the repair that comes after.
That's exactly right. And the second thing would be, even if you came to a primary attachment relationship securely attached, your calls were answered all the time, that you feel like it's okay to have needs, you feel healthy about it, you're regulated, all of those sort of things, you will still pursue or withdraw when the stakes get high enough. You will go into one of those responses. Just like if a lion hopped through the door right now, no matter how secure I am and who I am, I'm not going to chat with this lion and be like, dude, your mane looks great. Where have you been? Do you summer in Florida? Like, that tan is looking nice. I'm going to scream and pee and run and vomit, or freeze, or go punch the lion on the nose, or try to get a chair at it. We're going to go into our fight or flight or freeze responses. And that's all pursuit and withdrawal is. Pursuit is like fight. I'm fighting for the relationship and for you. Withdrawal is like flight, but to safety. And you're trying to get the person to go with you, but if they won't, you'll take the relationship and tuck it away safely until there's a safe time to bring it back out. And freeze is the worst, which is when we can't repair.
Yeah.
Our strategies don't work anymore. And it's hopelessness and despair. And that one, I talked about this on one of our live shows, and I just started, tears were just falling down my face, because when I sit with clients who freeze, it's just the most desperate situation. I can't get away and protect the relationship. And I also can't tell you how important it is. I have nothing anymore. And there's a good reason for that too, you know? So yeah, in the story, it was, I didn't think this way back then when we first saw it, but it's just what you said. Joel is withdrawing in the hopes of calming everything down and trying to keep the relationship going. Even when he's getting defensive, it's to try and push back.
It's so passive.
It's so
He's so passive in the movie.
It's hard, right?
Yes.
And for her, she gets mean. And we look at pursuers sometimes and say, if you weren't so mean, so critical or whatever, but she's doing it out of pain.
Well, she's trying to provoke a response.
She wants him to come out. And the more passive he gets, the more angry she gets. And the more she pokes him, just like you're saying. But then the more she does that, the more he shuts down. And you can see, like, it's mutually reinforced over time. And then they get more rigid and more rigid and more rigid, until finally she throws her hands up, which I see this in marriages and long-term relationships often. I'm just done. I can't do it anymore. It's worn me down. I'm exhausted. I raised the flag for years. You didn't listen. And now finally, I don't have anything to give anymore.
Yeah.
I'm done. And in the movie, she erases him.
Yeah. And
he's shocked.
yes.
Shocked. Which you would think, why are you surprised? This has been going on a long time. But he really is blindsided.
Well, in the context of the movie, it's not something that's widely known that you can do this. So he, I think, you know, like the breakup happens, he shows up at her Barnes & Noble that she works at with a gift.
Yes.
That and it was a gift that he like went to an antique store or vintage store or something.
Very
like,
thoughtful.
Very thoughtful. Not uncommon for a withdrawer, a head type to like ruminate and go, it's got to be something that means a lot.
Yeah.
And then when he shows up, she doesn't recognize him at all.
No.
And it throws him for a complete loop. And on top of that, he sees another guy come up and kiss her. So then he goes and hangs out with some of his friends, and they have this card that says, you know, hey, she's erased him from her memory, so don't mention it to her.
Yeah.
But he gets it. So he shows up at the place. He decides to get her erased.
Yeah.
So.
And he's very emotional. Like this is like this happens in therapy too, where the pursuing partner has a slow burn for years and eventually gets burnt out and can't do it anymore, leaves. And it's a lightning bolt for the withdrawing
Throws the
partner.
system off.
Throws the whole system. And then they go into this reactive, emotional, they almost look like a pursuer. Like, where come back to me. He keeps trying to show up where she is and demands that the doctor see him, and just kind of almost impulsively, which isn't really like him.
It's not him.
Goes and decides to get her out of the picture as well. And that's real life. I mean, it was so reflective of what I've seen in the work and in the lit that it was spot on. It was very real.
Yeah, and then the movie, in its nonlinear way, it's going through his memories of their relationship as they're getting erased. And then that video that I watched about the hair, it was saying the moment that he realizes that he regrets doing this, that he wants to keep, her hair's red. It's a
red.
memory where it was in the fullness of their
And
love.
it's bright. The lighting is really bright. There's some scenes that are so dark and people's faces, are distorted. And it's very bright and crisp and clear. And then he lets her into these childhood memories that she's never been before.
Away.
Yeah. And there's like this vulnerability that like he hasn't ever shown before. And it's almost like during the erasing, he wakes up to himself a good bit and he becomes vulnerable in a new way. He's engaging his own self of what he actually wants. He's not just trying to make sure she's happy or defend himself. He's now thinking, wait a minute, I want you. It's this engaged way of really perceiving what he wants in the
Which is
relationship.
something that I noticed along the way was anytime the two of them were together and a choice had to be made, whatever she wanted, he was like, that's fine, that's great, we'll go with that. And he never said, this is what I want. Even when they were getting together, he met her at the beach.
Yeah.
They got on the train. She was walking along the sidewalk. He pulled up and said, do you want to ride? So he drives her home and she just goes, hey, can I come sleep at your place?
Yeah.
I'm going to go in and get a toothbrush. So she comes back and it's just her saying, I want this. Not in a bad way, but like, I want this.
Yeah.
And then him just acquiescing. Okay, yeah, cool. But never saying, this is what I want. This is where I want to be. Yeah. Just going along with that.
Such a good point.
Leanne pointed out one of her favorite parts, and I hope I'm not stealing this from what she wants to say, was he was in a memory with her. They were in bed, and she was telling him about she had this doll that
the ugly
was
doll.
ugly, and she had named it Clementine or its name was Clementine already, whatever, but she would tell it, you can't be ugly, you can't be ugly. And it's him listening to her, and then he kind of like shifts to on top of her and just starts giving her 1,000 little kisses and just saying pretty, 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 and then she disappears.
Yeah.
It's the memory of her that disappears.
Going away, right.
And then it's him crawling through the covers trying to find her and get her, which is the beginnings of him kind of realizing, oh, I want it. I want this. I can't lose this.
Which takes us back to attachment theory, that all longing is really tethered back to loss. And so we can't touch our longing without fear of losing that same thing popping up at the same time. It's like a seesaw. If you push down on your longing, what pops up is your fear, which is why we get into these fight or flight, pursue, withdraw kind of places. It's exactly that. It wasn't until he lost her that he knew what he really wanted.
And I think to lose her in a scene where he was encountering this real part of her, this weak part of her for a character who was so bombastic and so out there and so confident, for her to be that vulnerable, for him to lose her in that moment was almost like, oh, that's the truest part of her.
It is.
I can't lose that.
Can I nerd out for a moment on that? Or
Always.
You tell me if it's too granular. So in EFT, in the second stage of the work, there are two main tasks, two change events that actually shift people from insecure to secure in themselves. So intrapsychically, but also interpersonally in the relationship. And they both happen at the same time. We want that in tandem. We talked about the withdrawal re-engagement with Joel. So instead of being passive, he's now saying, I want this. I'm not always going to get it right, but here I am. I want you. It's taking the risk before knowing, before putting it to safety. You're holding it out in front of you with the chances in that timid way, like my client was talking about, that it could be rejected, it could be destroyed. So that's withdrawal re-engagement, and that happens first. The other piece of it is exactly this that Clementine's talking about in that scene with the ugly doll is we ask formerly blaming critical pursuers, instead of being right and kind of coaching, directing, and the relationship being big and strong and knowing what you need and raising the alarm and being the responsible one for the relationship and kind of taking that high road, you were rejected in that place, right? Your partner wouldn't come when you were there. And that was like your best bet. There's a good reason for that. And what we're actually asking you to do is to drop out of that protective place and down into not even just the calm, sweet little girl that you are or boy that you are, but actually talk about the part that feels gross to you, the part that's shameful, the part that you're covering and fighting. There's anger and fight and protection as big as shameful and small and gross and rejected as you actually feel. And when you can access that small rejected part, what actually happens in your partner is they're hooked in because you have that attachment system. You have the bond. They want to come and be with you and soothe you pretty. It just unfolded. She didn't ask him to say that. She didn't have to. He offered it. I've got chills. So that's the other move.
She showed a need.
She did.
And then he just zoomed right in there.
Where usually she's like, I need you to show up or bring me flowers or to not lie to me anymore or to be this or that. Instead, she turned it back
she said,
inside.
call me tomorrow and tell me happy Valentine's Day.
And you know what? If he does that, what's she going to say? You only did that because I told you to. Whereas it's a trap. It is a trap. She doesn't even know it's a trap. He doesn't know, but it is, because there's no way you get success in that. You're going to fail either way. So instead, this is the risk before knowing. I don't know that you'll accept me. You didn't accept me at my best. That's the message. Why would you accept me at you'll leave me. You will abandon me. You'll be disgusted and you'll reject me. And so the healing comes not from showing you my best and you being there, because then there's always that part of you that goes, but you don't really know. You don't know how needy I am, how desperate I am to be loved, that I feel like I'm a sieve and your love falls out the bottom all the time and I'll never be full. You don't even know that. So actually going to that place, that's the healing. That's the moment of redemption or restoration, reconciliation, wholeness, whatever you want to call it, is deep down inside. I let you in. So I'm not going after you. It's actually becomes more receptive. I have to let go of control, let go of being right, and actually risk before knowing what you're going to do.
Yeah.
And so both partners then are on the same foundation. They're both at rock bottom, solid ground, turning to each other, asking in a pure way, will you really love me for who I am right here, right now?
So in just kind of hearing you describe the pursuer, we know that the pursuer gets big and protests the disconnection. What it sounds like you're saying too is that, and I'm a very visual, like any thought that I have gets constructed as an image in my head. So I'm picturing the pursuer. They're standing tall. Their feet are planted shoulder width apart. They got the shield. They got the sword. They're ready for battle. Their battle's in front of them. They're thinking, I'm going to protest this disconnection. But what I'm hearing you say is, at the same time, behind them is their wounded child. It's their shame. It's their fear. It's their part that they think, I've got to be strong, because if I'm not, then that will get hurt even more.
That's right. That's exactly it.
And so part of EFT, and I think this is the thing that, one of the things that hooked me was, it helps provide corrective emotional experiences for people, which I think is what you just described. And you used the word enactment earlier. It's de-escalating the couple to the place where the withdrawer can be invited to the table. And then when they can show up, when they feel safe enough to show up with their true self, just by, and I remember thinking, wait, why do you have to do the withdrawal first? Because of the way the cycle happens.
That's right.
And really it was the patterns of Joel and Clementine's relationship in the movie that made me think, I got to get Teri in here. So like, you get the withdrawer to the table, if they show up with their true self, it's their withdrawing that causes the pursuer to get activated and get big. So when they show up, they don't have to be that big anymore. They come down, they de-escalate, and then what's behind them that they're protecting, if they can bring that to the table.
That's right.
Then with an enactment, which oftentimes, and this seems so simple, to borrow a line from the show House, it's simple, but it's not easy.
Ooh, yeah. I love House. And that's accurate.
Yeah. To invite them to then, and oftentimes the enactment, it literally sounds like they'll be saying something to us as the therapist. I just wish that they knew how much and then all we do is just go, do you think you could say that to them right now? Mm-hmm. And they're, and
something happens, right?
The first time you say that, it's the same face every time. The mouth drops open, the eyes get wide, and they're like, I don't know if I can.
What?
They're inside, they're thinking, I don't know if I can.
Yeah.
And then, I remember you saying, EFT, we got to have some swivel chairs. You got to have.
Yes.
We don't do a couch.
Yeah.
Because we got to be able to turn them.
You have to turn.
So then you get them to turn, and then they look into an attachment theory. You talk about the way that attachments get written.
Yep.
Skin-to-skin contact, eye contact.
Mm-hmm. Those mirror neurons lighting up between
it's the
people.
neural pathways. And
That's
so
right.
you get them in enactment. They turn towards each other. They look each other right in the eye. If they're comfortable, maybe they can hold hands, maybe depending upon where they are in the work.
Yep.
But then to say what they couldn't say before to their partner, and
That's
they
right.
still in that moment don't know.
They don't know.
How's this going to go down?
That's right.
But they're willing. And it's because they've both, with their real self, shown up at the table.
Yep.
And so I think maybe subconsciously they can tell, I feel real timid right now. I feel real vulnerable, but it looks like they're in the same place.
That's right. Yes.
And so for the first time, the withdrawer feels like they're on equal footing with
That's
the pursuer.
right. That's right. And they are.
And that's why
It's life-changing.
we work on them first, because now all of a sudden they've got the courage
Yes.
to throw in with their real stuff.
Yes.
And
They do have what it takes.
yes.
And they need to know and
Yes.
experience it.
Yeah.
Because it's very different than the message they get when they're
Yeah.
in the pattern, when they're in
Yeah.
the cycle.
Yeah. And so watching Joel and Clementine through the movie, the seasons of their relationship is marked by the hair.
Mm-hmm.
I remember when I saw it the first time saying the ending was sad and it was vague. When I watched it this time, and we got to the end of it just last night, I think I turned to Leanne and the first thing I said was, I feel sad, but I don't think that that's sad. I think that's hopeless, because I just saw, they met the first time. They went through this whole pattern. They got their memories of each other erased, and they're starting to do the same stuff all over again. Mm-hmm. And then Joel did something different. Yeah. They got into a thing because the tape of his describing why he wants her erased was playing in his apartment. She comes in, hears some of it, and she takes off. Every time something like that happened in the movie prior to this, either A, he stood still and let her go, or B, he was the one to motor out of there.
Yes.
And so for the first time, he goes after her. Mm-hmm. And just like we were describing right now with the pursue withdraw, that withdrawer, tongue-tied, takes a step in. Joel comes after her. Hey, wait. And then they start talking. And they kind of recognize how they both are. She's like, I'm going to get bored with you. And I'm going to want to, get out of here. And you're going to get pissed at me. And you're going to get quiet. And I think he says something like, yeah, so.
Yeah. So
yeah, that's
instead of, no, I won't, I'll make you happy. He does
Yes.
not placate. He tells the truth. And she's a little softer. A little.
Yes. And that was something that it almost made me want to jump off the couch and do a fist pump, because you literally see, and we just described it, what it might look like in a session, but you literally see the pursuer all of a sudden just drop. They just drop.
Oh, it gives me chills.
And she got the glassy kind of teary eyes.
You saw the hope and and that's the thing that starts to happen is I really believe, and I really do believe it wholeheartedly, and my experience has been that even where there's been hopelessness, if the hopelessness is really attached to the futility of the cycle, that we can't get ourselves out of this no matter what we do, then the hope is, EFT just provides a third route.
Yes.
That's it.
It's a choice.
It's just a choice. It's a new choice, and you can choose to go or not. My job is not to drag people out of their cycle. It's just to offer a new path. And I am not the Moses standing on top of the mountain. I am more like a whitewater rafting guide. We're all in the boat and we're all going to go. I've just done this river 1,000 times, but you got to hold on and you got to look where you're going and you got to get back in the boat when you fall out. Like we can do it though. Like I know that we can do it. If you want to do it, we have the option of doing it. And if you choose to stay together or not, that's on you. That's your choice. But what I do know is going through this process, you will know yourself. Yeah. You will know how to engage. You will know how to drop down into that vulnerable place and how to really be with each other if you so choose. But you'll know what you're getting into instead of not knowing why we get stuck, not knowing how to get out of it.
And I think just the choice part, it's something that I have described my therapy as a client as before, where before I went into it, I didn't have a choice in how I was living my life.
Yeah. My tool bag was like empty.
When I was in it and after, now I have a choice. Do I always make that right choice? No. I'm a person. I got a bad case of being a person. It's
it's very
terminal.
catching.
It's gonna be with me forever. But now I do have that choice. And I think that what EFT, what therapy can provide to a couple is that choice. We can help spot the patterns. We can help spot the things that are occurring. Yeah. Call them out, help de-escalate, help get them there. And, oh gosh, I forgot where I was going to go with that. But like, he goes after her. She responds. I don't know. Oh, hurt. Yes. So the whole premise of the movie is that they erase each other from their memories. And so when they meet and they begin to get into the same pattern, the same cycle, the reason why I felt so sad at the end of watching it was they don't stand a chance.
Right.
They're just getting caught in the same cycle again. Is it an infinite loop? And the reason why I thought that was Chip Dodd, who's here in town, the voice of the heart. I will mention it a million times
His
on the
work
show.
was life-changing for me.
Because it was the first book that I got when I got into therapy as a client, and it's the language that I learned to speak my emotions in. Yep. And so for me, no matter what kind of label I'm going to slap on my work, that's going to be the foundation that it's built on. Chip says, of the feelings that you have, there's 1,000,001 feelings, but you can kind of put emotions, but you can kind of put them in 8 feeling buckets, call them categories. So you could say, oh, I feel embarrassed, and he'd put it in the shame bucket. Yeah. That's okay. We're not picky about what words you use. We just want to give you some language. So he says that every feeling is neutral. It's not good or bad. It's an alert that says something's happening in my heart I need to pay attention to.
It's like a dashboard light. It's
yes.
Letting you know something's happening.
Yes. Although in that metaphor, I still don't know what a lot of my dashboard lights mean.
Same. Well, and I could say that about some feelings too.
Absolutely. We don't have it all the way right.
We don't. We're still working on it.
So both of them have hurt that they're running from. And the way that they run from it is they get each other erased. Yeah. The problem with that is when you get back into the relationship and the patterns show back up, the thing that helps the patterns change is the hurt.
It's true.
The hurt is the motivator. And what Chip would say is, even though a feeling is neutral, each feeling has a gift and an impairment. So by, I don't know if I want to use the word embracing, but by embracing the feeling, by sitting in the feeling, by engaging with the feeling, you can let the feeling lead you towards I'm going to use the word productive action, or you can let it lead you towards a destructive action.
Yeah, no, that makes sense to me.
So with hurt, the gift of hurt is healing and courage. And the impairment of hurt is resentment. And so by removing their hurt from them, how can they have the courage to step forward like we've been talking about and let their true self be seen, be vulnerable, and have a restorative, a corrective emotional experience to where that healing can happen? How can they do that without the hurt? You can't be courageous without the hurt.
You can't. And clients will ask for that. I mean, don't we all think sometimes it would be better if I didn't have this pain or this hurt? So in the movie, it's interesting you saying that makes me remember Clementine was not fine after the erasure. She was not
No.
okay. She was
Now,
falling
part of that was a
apart.
creepy dude was using
That
all of
creepy
Joel's,
dude was.
like,
I also think Joel wasn't fine. He walks out and his car's got a scratch and he's bamboozled. He does not have any idea.
and he writes a note
He
that
writes
just
a
says
note.
thanks,
Thanks.
and that's it.
That's it. It's so passive
The
aggressive.
most passive aggressive.
Nobody's fine.
I would have keyed that car.
Oh, the car is ruined.
Just Nashville Metro PD. That was a joke. I would not. Please don't.
No. We would definitely not write.
Yeah.
But the Brene Brown says a similar thing. We can't selectively numb. If you numb hurt, you numb everything.
Yeah.
How do you have joy? If you just duct tape over your dash lights, your car is going to explode. Like, you're not going to be fine. These folks are not going to be fine. It would be hopelessness and despair.
Yeah.
The interesting thing is, I wonder, listening to each other's tapes, if the reason they weren't supposed to be exposed again, this is all just me imagining. What if the tapes brought the hurt back online? And that was the reason they had the courage to do something different.
Oh, yeah.
Because they went ahead and heard it. That was painful to hear the emotion
From their
in
own
their
voice.
voices from their own voice.
Yeah.
It's almost like reading a journal you wrote in junior high, and you're like, woo, Chica was going through some things,
Yeah.
that was
I'm
not
glad
fun.
I didn't become literate till high school.
Right.
That was a gift. That was a gift.
I used to rip my journal pages out and toss them out after I would move on.
Huh.
Yeah, there's probably a whole thing about that we could go into.
And here's what's interesting, too. The first tape that they begin listening to is Clementine's, and it's while Joel's driving. So he's hearing her speak these things.
Yeah.
And he bails again.
Yes, he does.
Stops the car, opens the door, gets her out. He goes
her
home.
criticisms don't change him.
Right.
It's the same.
He goes home and begins listening to his tape, and that's what gets him, is he's now re-engaging the hurt.
Yes.
He's now coming back online to the feeling. And then by re-engaging that hurt, he gets that courage.
He does.
That's what lets him change.
That's
it wasn't her voice
No,
again. It was his.
It was his. And that's the trick. People think I'm going to go to couples counseling and change my partner, and then we'll be able to be together. And what actually happens is you change yourself so that you are available to choose your partner.
It just so happens the change in both people is happening concurrently.
It's right. That's right.
And
right.
I would say because of that.
Yes.
Because you're not going to two separate rooms.
Nope. I need to have that visceral physiological response when I turn and look at you.
Yeah.
When I hear it in the room with me, in the same way as hearing the tape. It's all in the same room. The emotion is present. It's the same. If you go to a concert that you love and you go home and try and tell your partner about it, it's impossible to sort of describe and let them know how it really is. So going home and trying to describe what happened in therapy,
Right.
It's kind of like, so I cried. Okay, why?
And I know because I've had this. I know you had to have.
Mm-hmm.
You have the well, maybe not, because you say that you do mostly couples, but like you have the individual show up.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me what brings you in. Well, I'm here because of my spouse.
Yes.
Da da da. And
Yes.
I will listen
Yep.
and I will align and all that. And then at the end, I will say, "What do you think the chances are we can get them in here with you?"
Oh, I'm always trying to recruit
Yeah.
partners to come in.
Yeah.
Because of that, if they're willing to come, and I work with individuals occasionally, not as often, probably a quarter of my practice might be individuals, but if they don't come, okay, we can still work with that. There's a lot of good work to be done. But if I can get the partner in there, it decreases, according to research too, decreases the amount of time therapy takes because of what you're talking about, the concurrent movement and growth. They're working both interpersonally and intrapsychically, which is inside a person, their own emotional experience in the presence of their partner. So the partner is changing and challenging their perceptions of the partner while that partner is talking about things. So if Joel and Clementine were in my office and Joel starts to express his pain, and I can hold Clementine in that moment, not pursuing, not criticizing, but just be with him, and then he starts to access some of his vulnerable stuff, she's going to be changed. Because that's the thing that doesn't get to happen when you're stuck.
Well, it's
in the
like what you
pattern.
said. Everybody makes sense in the context of their own story. When they're together in the room, they're getting the context
They're
of the
getting
story.
the context, the same. They get a cohesive
at the
narrative.
same time.
Yeah, and it helps me too. Honestly, it helps me because just dropping into emotion without a reference point is harder for me. It's just a skill that I'm always having to work on. I do better the more parts of the system that are literally present in the room. I'm a better therapist when that's going on. I can do individual work. I just have to do a lot of assessment and learn as much as I can about their system, so the system's still kind of in the room, even if they're not literally physically
including
in the
literally
room.
drawing it on a
I
clipboard
do.
so you
Yes.
can kind of.
We can point. We can look.
I had a
Yes.
client say the other, like, he was giving me a bunch of names. He's like, I'm so sorry about this. I was like,
No,
what do you think I'm drawing on the clipboard
Yeah.
here? Like, I'm tracking with you.
This is helpful.
I've got to
Right.
put it down because I need to know when you say Bob,
Yeah.
you mean this person in your life. When you
Yes.
say Sally, you mean this person in your life.
Yeah. I would actually say, too, I think what makes me a good professor is that it didn't all just come naturally to me, that I had to learn everything from a lot of different places and learn how to trust myself. And so I want to offer that, too. Like, if there are people who think I'm just not good at emotion, maybe secure attachment isn't a thing for me, or going to therapy won't work because I'm not like this emotional crying person. That's really not what it is. That's
Yeah.
not the only way to really go about this. Like, I think we're effective the more that we just are who we are. So I don't try to be a touchy-feely, that kind of therapist. I'm the me version. You're the
Those
you
therapists
version.
exist,
And there's
they're
a need
great.
for it.
Yeah.
Exactly. Because that's their strength. My
Yes.
best friend therapist is the touchiest, feeliest, warmest, satyr-like, a hug walking around in human form, like chocolate melted into a person, and that's exactly what people need
Yeah.
in that moment for her. And people come to me for a very different reason in the way
Yeah.
that I show up in the room. And I don't know, I just feel incredibly strongly to make sure that people know exactly what you're talking about at the beginning, that there are so many ways to be and to be present. We're so unique in those certain things, even though there are these general patterns we fall into. The way that we show up and what we need are very unique to us. And it's
Yeah.
owning that part that is such a beautiful thing. I'm not a good teacher because I was already just good at these things. It's the work, and it's worth
Well, that's
the
why they
work.
call it practice.
That's why they call it practice.
Yeah.
And I'll be practicing forever.
Forever.
Working on it all the time. I cried right before this podcast in the arms of my husband. Just, I'm too overwhelmed and I'm stressed, and it's just,
I mean,
and I didn't even know, you know?
after the movie last night, I mean, even just talking about this on the couch, Leanna and I had a moment and I ended up crying.
Yeah.
I was like
Yep.
leaning back on the couch looking up at her, and I feel the tears start to stream down my face
Do they ever surprise you?
all the time.
They do, me too.
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely times where I know something's gonna get me.
Yeah, it's like comes. Uh-huh.
Or even like, there's a, do you know who Kid President is?
Yes, I love
Okay.
Kid President.
So, his pep talk?
Uh-huh.
that he gives? Okay, so these other guys on YouTube made a song out of it.
Oh, really?
It's on my iPhone.
I need to look it up.
Yeah, I'll send it to you. Hearing that song, guaranteed cry every time.
Yeah.
Because when
Yeah.
he says keep going, keep going, keep going, and it's in a song form, forget it. I know it's going to make me cry. So there's certain things that I know whenever I engage with it.
that.
Whenever I watch Up, there's 3
Oh,
times I'm going to
The
cry.
opening sequence?
The opening sequence. It's when Carl turns Russell away, goes inside, and picks up the adventure book and gets to the end, and Ellie wrote him a note.
Oh, my gosh.
And then it's at the very end where he pins
he-
the bottle cap on him.
Oh,
Those 3
I've got-
times,
Yes.
I will
Chills.
melt into a puddle of tears. But then there's also these times. I have a bad case of being a person. So there are these times where it sneaks up on me. And those times, I think, more than the times I know it's coming, I feel like more of a real person.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like this is to be caught off guard by something that is true, something that connects with a part of me that maybe I don't keep near the surface, is when I feel more like, well, this is just the gift of being alive.
I resonate really deeply with that. It's like, oh, I was moved.
Yeah.
Like something stirred and moved through me, like the Velveteen Rabbit that's all like missing an eye button and whatever. I'll say it in me terms. I think that I want to be the glossy, perfect bunny up on a shelf, but that's actually not accurate.
Yeah.
What I actually want to be is held and seen and loved and imperfect and broken in the best sort of ways, where I have cracks that my light pours out, and that I cuss occasionally. I'm not supposed to do that, that I'm inappropriate at times, that I'm messy, and that I'm loved right where I am. Like, I felt the tears coming up today for like 10 minutes, and I don't know why I was like biting my cheeks and trying to not cry, and like I'll hold my eyelids out to
Did
try
you do
and
the
keep
girl thing where you like kind of like touched the side of your eye with
I
your
would
finger?
have, but I didn't have my mascara on yet. I
Oh.
100% would have done that and held the thing. And then I just looked at my husband, and he was just there.
Mm-hmm.
And they just beyond, it's like the tears went up and over my wall.
Yeah, that's
And then
the
the wall
safe harbor.
just, it was, and then it just came down, and my walls came down, and then I was like 4-year-old crying, like laying in the floor crying into your pillow that you couldn't go to a
The
sleepover
deep
that broke.
sobs.
Like there was a grief about it. Yes, like a body thing. And I was like, I already know our neighbor can hear us because she told us. We'll have to talk about that after we get off the podcast. It's a
Hi, neighbor.
very interesting. Yeah, hi neighbor. Hi.
Thanks for subscribing.
Thanks for subscribing. So I was like, they're gonna hear me cry, which it's so funny the stuff that happens, but the being held and the crying, it's still such an interesting new experience that I could actually be that vulnerable and to still be okay. Like I made it, it didn't kill me. No one rejected me. And actually I could manage. It didn't wreck my day. Like I moved through it, and then I washed my face, and I felt the openness that comes from just being in sorrow.
And it probably met a need
It did.
that you had that maybe you didn't even know.
I didn't even know.
Yeah.
My husband had even said to me earlier, "What do you need?" And I yelled at him. Listen, if I knew that, I wouldn't be feeling whatever the hell is going on with me right now. And I'm stomping around. I was fussy with our dog. Fussy's a nice way of saying that I avoided him. Like I was actually full on withdrawn
avoiding
from him.
attachment with pets.
With my pet.
That's next week's episode.
Yeah, bless his heart. And he was like bitey with me, and I was like, he was pursuing me. And then when that happened, it's like it all just sort of clicked into place. And then the thing that I always think is, and I can go into shame, like, why did I wait so long? Like, why didn't I just let myself feel?
Why did I do it better?
Why I should have been a better sad feeler.
Yeah.
But then on the heels of that, like part of my work in therapy has been this practice of self-compassion. Like, what if it is enough that I did feel, that I am present to myself, that there isn't sort of this moratorium on how long it should take to feel? Like, what if I just get to be? What if I just get to be a human being? And that's actually the gift that I bring, that it's not the performing perfectly or the bunny on the shelf. It's actually the real self. And in that, it's like this gratitude comes. And it's not the gratitude that comes because I got it right, but actually because I just am sitting in this accepting place that was a real hot turd pile before I got to here. And that's just what it is.
I had a boss one time that said anything worth doing is worth doing badly. And
I think really good.
And I think that
I need a sticky of that on my monitor.
I think that counts for feelings and engagement and attachment too. It's worth doing, and it's worth doing badly. So any effort you put into it is a win. And I think, just what you're describing, it's almost like as a therapist, we get like a special extra little bit of shame because if we get trapped in, we should know better. And what Leanne hits me with all the time, and inevitably, if I can't get there when she throws this out, it drops me right down. What would you tell your client?
Oh, that's really good.
And
because it wouldn't be shame, and it wouldn't be
because I think for us, it is. We have the ability, because we're unbiased, because we're the outsider, to offer grace and understanding and a perspective because we're not as close to the picture. But then when we are close to the picture, then we lose that perspective because we're too busy dealing with our terminal personhood.
My cortex goes right out the window.
So it's what Richard Rohr calls observing the other. When she says, what would you tell your client? It lets me zoom up 10 feet and look down at myself and see, oh, you poor kid.
Sweet love. That's what I say to myself.
Yeah.
Sweet
you just
love.
need somebody to come along and tell you, you did such a great job, and I'm so proud of you, and I love you so much, and I don't care what the result was.
Right where you are.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, it's so beautiful.
Yep. So now that we're all teared up.
I know.
Teri, thank you so much. Like, I can't even tell you how much I respect you, admire you, look up to you, like all of the things. And I think it's really interesting to hear Three's perspective because, like, I think, you know, during the times that we haven't been able to get together and talk, I see what's going on the Instagram stuff, and I'm like, man, boss mode. She's handling it. She's doing the thing. And I'm like, here I am just trying to get things off the ground. Why can't I?
Yeah.
But then just to hear that, to hear the backstory to it is such a gift.
Thank you.
To be able to just, and really, what therapist wouldn't say this, to be able to understand somebody is the gift.
Yeah.
It's because it's receiving, it's engaging in intimacy where you get to hear somebody else's story, which connects you to them. And then throughout that time, you're reflecting on your own story, which connects you to you.
Yes.
And so it's just a win-win-win all around.
It feels like that to me too.
Yeah. So let's say that somebody was listening to today's episode and they just think, man, I love what she's saying. I love who she is. And I think that I'd like to see somebody. I'd like it to be her. How can people connect with you?
Yeah. So you mentioned Instagram. I'm on Instagram and Facebook, Dr. Teri Murphy. So at Dr. Teri Murphy on all of my social platforms, Twitter too. I'm probably most likely to be on Instagram. I have an Ask a Therapist in my stories every Thursday. So even if you can't afford therapy or can't get in, or it's not really that you need therapy, but you just are curious, you want to talk about relationships, talk about depression, mental illness, access to care, just questions you've got. You can ask questions for free.
Yeah.
I do that every Thursday. If you
Answered anonymously.
Anonymously. Yeah, absolutely anonymously. Been doing that for several months. There's a live show that we have, my husband and I do in the mornings, and we love that. And it's fun, and it's kind of what you and I are doing here. So just talking about life, and then we have themes, so a topic we talk about. And then if you're looking for therapy, you can go to my website, terimurphy.com, TERIMURPHY. There's just one R in there.
Yeah. Your Ask a Therapist that happens on Thursday, even if you don't have a question, totally recommend that you check that out, just because, as anything else in life, if you can learn from somebody else's experience, it may save you from going something yourself.
Yeah.
In a similar vein, something that we're going to be starting up here on the show in a couple of weeks is we're actually going to be taking people's questions here on the show.
That's so exciting.
So if you're listening right now and you have a question about a relationship issue, a mental health issue, anything at all that you would love to ask a therapist, not to steal, I'm not trying to steal your, we're not calling the segment that.
You can call it.
We just are
we
therapists.
need it.
We're therapists, and you're going to ask us a thing.
That's right.
Maybe that's the title there. But all that to say, you can email the show at therapisttheater@gmail.com.
Perfect.
We will answer the question, me and the guest of the week, on the show. And it'll be anonymous as well. So you can do that here. In the meantime, if you want something that happens every Thursday instead of every Wednesday, you can go to Teri's Instagram to get that done. Teri,
I'm so glad you're doing that. We need to make mental health accessible to everyone. It's a huge deal. I'm so glad you're doing that.
It's scary and it's mysterious
and there's
until
a stigma still
until you get in it, and then you realize,
we're just people.
Yeah.
Here we are.
Just dealing with that personhood.
Thank you for
Teri,
having
thanks.
me.
Yeah.
This has been a huge, huge honor. I'm so glad we're friends.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Cool. Leanne, you had an opportunity to listen to a preview version of the episode. You get first access.
The unedited version.
Yeah. Tell me. Did you enjoy it? What were your thoughts? Did you grab anything from it?
I loved it so much. First of all, yes, as always, I grabbed a couple things. I had a lot of thoughts, but I will only say a few of them. So when you guys talked about opposites attracting, Teri said that people can be attracted to someone who can, quote unquote, round them out. And I was just thinking when she said that, and maybe it can be a little bit of both of these things, but I just think it could also be a case of someone being attracted to the qualities that they wish they had more of, or like think that they should have more of. So like if I am generally extroverted and loud, but I don't like that about myself, or, you know, I think I should be different, and I meet someone who is introverted and thoughtful and quiet, that maybe I would be with them because, you know, that's the way I think I should be. So I think the whole point of that was just to say that I think it's really important to like yourself before you get into a relationship, because if you're, I mean, A, if you don't like yourself, there's other things going on, but B, if you don't like yourself and you're with someone because they have qualities that you want, that's just not a healthy way to go into a relationship. You're like looking for them to be things, you know, that you can't be, and automatically that just sets up like a weird dynamic. So anyways, there's just a thought that I had when you guys were talking about that.
And I mean, even in our story, I know that I said before we got together that I was finally in a place where I actually liked myself. Mm-hmm. And I think that did make a tremendous difference in, you know, how I experienced myself. And certainly, I mean, I'm sure first impressions of me that you had and how you experienced me. And I know that you've said as well before we got together, that you had been doing some personal work and had gotten to a place where you liked yourself as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I also, I like what you just said like a second ago. If you're not in that place, it's as if you're looking to somebody else to be something that you need to have inside of yourself.
Yes.
So it's like you're looking to another person to complete you, to quote Jerry Maguire, or to fill something inside of yourself that maybe you feel is empty. Mm-hmm. And ultimately, it's just not going to work.
Yeah. I think you're like setting yourself up for failure if that is what if that's the expectation you're putting on a partner.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's why Paula Abdul and MC Scat Cat never worked out from the Opposites Attract music video, because that's what was going on.
Wow.
She was looking at him to complete her. And it just didn't work out. Thank you. Next.
Ooh. So also when you guys were talking about pursue and withdraw, it just made me remember when I learned about those patterns and how just crazy helpful and like life-changing it was for me. I remember, I think mainly I learned about them from both hearing from you and also reading this book, Created for Connection, which is by Sue Johnson, who I think you guys talked about, and Kenny Sandifer and whatever. And we've read it, so you know, but for people listening, that's who it's by. And I remember, what I remember is reading in the book just about pursue and withdraw and those patterns and those behaviors. And all of the sudden just understanding so much of my own feelings and like my behaviors in past relationships and even in our relationship. It just put so much into context. So I love that you guys talked about that and explained it, because I just think that's so helpful. And it also, I just think it's helpful to hear how important attachment is to us biologically. I think society just tells us not to depend on someone else. Like it's so pro independence and anti, you know, being truly dependent on an attachment figure. And so I think it's just important to hear that in fact we're wired to want and to try to build a secure attached relationship. So yeah, I think that's crazy interesting and important to hear. And I also really appreciated, Teri said something along the lines of that, like, no matter how secure my attachment is, I will move towards pursue or withdraw when the stakes are high enough. Mm-hmm. That might be a direct quote. It's possible I wrote it down. And I love that. And I think that's almost, I don't know the word that I'm looking for, but there's something in that takes the shame away from depending on an attachment figure or, you know, feeling a certain way when that primary attachment relationship is threatened. Like, I know for me, I always kind of double talk myself. Like, I'll feel something. I'll feel afraid about something in our relationship, and then I'll sort of shame myself and say, well, I don't want to be the crazy girlfriend, or, you know, whatever it is. I've heard that a lot. And I think this stuff, you know, this science shows that it's not crazy to value and to protect and to want to grow, you know, your primary attachment relationship.
Yeah. Well, A, you're not my girlfriend, you're my wife.
Well, I know.
And B,
what?
I think what is interesting about that, it reminds me of whenever we first started learning about attachment theory, because hearing that the 4 types are secure, anxious, avoidant, and disorganized, and then kind of coming to the conclusion that I was in the avoidant category, you know, my first thought is, well, you know, I should be insecure. I should be in the secure category. And, you know, health would be working my way to there and then remaining there. But what Teri was saying to that part of the show was, you know, if the stakes get high enough, which, you know, for you and I, you're my primary attachment figure, I'm yours. So the stakes are highest with us. Mm-hmm. So when the stakes are highest, you're going to still go avoidant withdraw or pursue, no matter how much work you've done, because it is in an effort to protest or preserve a feeling of detachment, a feeling of disconnectedness, a feeling of, oh my gosh, you know, the person that I care the most about, you know, might be slipping away, or maybe even it just feels that way. Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, for me, even it helped kind of diffuse some shame and some fear that I had around that. Just knowing that, you know, I could do all the work in the world. I could go to therapy for 50 years, and I could think that I have myself under the most control. And, you know, you come home an hour later one night, and all of a sudden I'm you know, panicking about it or something. But it's just because you matter to me more than anybody else.
Yeah.
So all in all, I'd say great episode.
Oh my gosh. So good.
Would recommend.
5 out of 5 stars.
Absolutely. Best movie ever. Yeah. There's not really like a not awkward way to close out the outro. I think if people have made it this far, you've completed a marathon.
You really have.
We'll be sending you your medals in the mail. All you got to do is email us at therapisttheater@gmail.com.
And let me just say, I appreciate it. Being the one on the end of the episode really means a lot that you guys stick around.
Well, I'll tell you, I have heard that most people just fast forward to the end and listen to you, and then they go back to the beginning to hear me.
I
and the
hope
rest
so.
Of yeah, I can only imagine. That's what I would do. So thanks for joining us this week on Therapist Theater. With that, we're going to dim the lights because the theater is closed.